Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Passionately Wrong podcast. I'm James, and I'm here with my co-host, Randy. And today we have the pleasure of an interview guest. It's my friend, Natalia Roman Lopez, who I've known for a number of years. And I met her when we were both working at Mettler Toledo, and it was during some lunchtime runs that she came and joined us, and we'll talk about that. Natalia, I realized looking over your bio, preparing for this session, that you have had a ton of different jobs. Really quite impressive. You've been in a lot of different settings. I think the thread that holds them all together is your interest in marketing. You're now running your own B2B marketing company. Maybe just introduce yourself for a few minutes. Let us know some of the whistle stops along the way. How did you come to have the experience and know-how that you do now from a professional perspective? And then we'll get into some of the other stuff as well after that.
Yeah, thank you, James. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to be here with you guys. I think it was during those lunch runs that we found the meaning of life, probably, didn't we?
I think that was a big part of it. Yes.
Yes, as you were just mentioning, I think it's quite important to for me to look back at how I ended up where I am today, which is I'm sitting in Switzerland. And although I originally come from Spain, and it was a big life decision to move here when I was still doing my studies. So I am by education a journalist. And I had this opportunity. I didn't know how big it would be, but something was telling me that it could be life changing. So I jumped into this opportunity of coming here as a student. And I think it took me about a week to realize that this is it, or at least for me. So that was back in 2010. And I just made a plan, an evil plan to end up or establish myself in this country, which took several months, years to execute, but eventually led me to, on one hand, or to basically marry two of my passions. So one being the outdoors, nature, spending time in the mountains, moving in the mountains, and at the same time to have the opportunity to develop as a young professional, which at the time I really felt I I couldn't have both back in Spain. And this was I was quite sad about that, about having to make a decision like whether to have more of a professional development or enjoy. Yeah. So I've gone through the different stages of marketing, if you will. Yes, we were together for, I think, about 4 years at Miller. It was probably the longest that I have been at the company. And at some point, yes, I concluded that the issues that corporations face, like B2B, technical, science driven, when it comes to their marketing, repeat themselves regardless of size and the area of business. And I'm an impatient person, let's put it that way. And also a bit of an agent of change. And I was getting frustrated by not being able to change, or I would see all these problems and they were so obvious to me. And I felt, oh my God, these people, how can they not see it and want to do something about it? So this is what led me to starting my own business and trying to, from the outside, help those who are already seeking help, which is already one step. Like you already know that you have an issue and you want to do something about it.
That is a nice introduction. Thanks for that. I didn't realize that your education was in journalism. The thing you said at the end, it's slightly contradictory in my view, and I want to explore it just a moment. And you said, on the one hand, you consider yourself to be an impatient person. And then you described that as more, you're an agent of change. You want to make an impact, see things that aren't working well, make them better. The journey you just described and what we know about your passion and performance outdoors has, for me, nothing to do with impatience. It has to do with somebody who's actually unusually good at planning and looking ahead and just saying, hey, how can I take two things that are really interesting to me and important to me, my desire to have good career development and my desire to be somewhere where I can enjoy the outdoors, and then to put in motion a plan to move from Spain to Switzerland. That's, by the way, not easy for anyone. Switzerland is hard to get into. It doesn't like people to just show up.
Young, young woman and foreigner.
And job prospects, it's obviously you can do it and you did it. And congratulations for having made it a success. But that suggests a serious amount of not just willpower and determination, but also planning. So it was the impatient part that, and when I consider how hard you'll work to get ready for an endurance event, for example, that's months and years of planning. I think we'll understand your impatience to mean more what do you call your blog? Permanent movement. It's the certain perpetual motion machine that I think you're describing, the desire to be doing something, to be making change that I understand from your comment there.
Yes, you just read my mind. It's about progress, right? It's about implementing, even if it's a small incremental change, but you lay out your plan and you derive from the plan. That's not a problem, but there is motion, there is progress. And sometimes maybe you go a bit backwards. That's okay. You learn. But yeah, I also learned that I need a supportive environment. And I think this goes for not just work, but also if you think of, it's also contradictory, right? If you think of ultra distance running, it's a very lonely sport. Like you spend a lot of hours on your own. And at the same time, it couldn't be more of a team effort to have a support system around it and to have the people that know you at aid stations, the people that love you, and they might help you either emotionally or they might just help you with the gear. Yeah, I think the supportive environment is something that I've learned over time. I thought, oh my God, like I can be the one that kind of fights against the waves, and not really.
So I think that makes sense. And for a lot of people, that is one of the reasons why they either like the work environment that they're in or they don't. They either have friends and colleagues and a boss and a team that supports them or doesn't. And you've been in many different types of work environments, so probably have a good sense of better ones and worse ones. And I'll just put in a plug for Mettler. I'm sure that's why you stayed at Mettler as long as you did. Compared to the others, both the concept of continuous improvement and regular change and hopefully good people. But I'm curious, how does it feel now running your own business? Where do you find the professional support that helps you feel like you're getting enough support? Does it come from clients? Does it come from people how would you describe it? I'm just curious.
Yeah, good question. It is challenging and there is a lot of self-management included. So I think the biggest job that I have to do is to manage that I'm not in the high highs or in the low lows, that you're somewhere in between and you take more or less every day as it comes. I get a lot of a lot of content out of knowing that I'm trying as hard as I can. And I actually, it's interesting. My parents have supported me a lot in making this step. And it's not that it's not that that they understand completely what I do. Definitely not. Or that we are like talking about it all the time. But whenever the topic came up, they were completely confident that I would make it. And I think that's, for me, it's been a big thing. Friends as well. And I have to say, this is the second time I try to start my own business, because the first time I was getting started in March 2020. So that was a very unfortunate timing. But sometimes I don't like to say like it was not meant to be, because that's personally, I don't believe in that. But it was a project that it was too bad to let it die. And I'm just very happy that circumstances came together now. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever left a company because of the people. And if I look back, at least I took one friend from each, and most of the times multiple friends. If I think of yesterday, I met somebody who I became friends or worked with in 2012. In the evening, I got a message from one of my ex-bosses saying that he just got a new job and maybe we can exchange about whether he should take it or not. Like, it's, yeah, I'm very happy about still having those people in my life today, personal and professional. And sharing helps a lot. But I think you yourself need to work on as hard as possible and also manage your time, making sure that you have a healthy, also private life that translates also into your professional life. Yeah.
I think we're going to segue shortly to some of your thoughts on balancing work and life and your philosophy of life that you alluded to earlier. I just want to remark on what you said about the support system that you have around you, which you described well. Your parents, I like that angle. Actually, it is nice knowing that your parents support you. And on the one hand, you could say, yeah, sure, that's what parents are for, to love a person unconditionally and support them. First of all, they don't always. So it's nice when they do. And second of all, if they have absolute confidence in your case that you'll succeed, let's not forget it's because they know you better than anybody. They've seen what you can do, and hopefully their confidence is well founded. So that's nice to hear, though, and I'm happy to hear that. You sent us a short description of your philosophy of life, which I'd like to discuss with you. I think you left off a branch of philosophy, though. You said you would like to talk about hedonistic stoicism. And only slightly jokingly, I think you left off masochism. And
Come on.
well, that's going to sound strange to people who don't know you yet. But when we get into the discussion of how you spend your outdoor time, I think people will absolutely understand why I asked if you've left something off the list. But first, let's start, all joking aside, with maybe you describe just briefly what you understand hedonistic stoicism to me, and help us get into the concept a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sure.
you have two adherents to those two pieces. I'm a Stoic by heart, and Randy is a hedonist. So just kidding, Randy.
Look, each of you brought 50% to the
Exactly.
table.
And you're going to make sense of the two of us. Yep, please.
Yeah. So I think I've been that way, and only lately I found a word for it. So, like you, James, Stoicism is at the core, I would say. And I learned many years back, I think he's not just one of my mentors, but a role model, friend of mine who is now, I think he's just turned 78. And he's the father of a friend and has been his whole life being a mountaineer. Oh, as a side job. He had a family, he had a job, and he's just like a brutal implementation of being stoic. And he told me once that the easiest way for him to live was to apply this 3 principle. So when something happens, like he asks himself, can I do something about it? Yes, no. If you cannot, like, park it. And this is really hard because you can imagine, like, the hardest expression of this is like death of somebody who is very close to you. Can you do something about it? No. And that doesn't mean that you can just like not grieve for. But then he didn't stop there. He always said, okay, the fact that you can do something about an event, it doesn't mean that you will. So then the second question is, and so do you want to do something about it? And then if you say yes, then you have to be like, you devote yourself, but you also accept that by choosing to do something, there's always a trade-off. There will be something that you'll have to compromise on, or maybe you'll have to work really hard and you'll see you will get there maybe in some years. And so that really taught me an approach to life, and it's really hard to apply. And then the second layer of, okay, it's like being this stoic, it brings a lot of inner content, right? Like you have this, once you manage to be like with yourself, then it's much easier to share with others and to be like a contributor to others. But I also there was also a time where I thought like this hedonistic aspect is in contradiction. And I don't think so. And this is why I like to combine both of them and say it's okay to consciously go for hedonism now and then if you choose to. So it's not like you're dragged by your passions or by pleasure or what you name it, but it's more to say, I choose now, I don't know, I choose beauty over reason, just to say something. I applied quite a bit when we go backcountry skiing, because there's a lot of, and this opens a complete different topic on risk management, etc. But I tell my friends we're gonna ski as if there's no tomorrow. So that's very that's very hedonistic in a way. But we're gonna do it as if it's gonna last forever. Like we're gonna make decisions based on it has to be sustainable in the long term. But within that frame, we're just gonna give it all and have the best possible time.
That's actually really interesting. I didn't know about your role model mentor and the impact that he had on your development of your own philosophy just by watching him himself in the way he lived his life. The idea of, first of all, distinguishing what's in your control and what's not. And then secondly, making a conscious choice. If it is partly in your control, do I choose to act and to do something here? And then the next element, which I really like, it's a very mature way of looking at the choices that we make, which is, look, this choice is going to come with costs, both the work that I put in and the effort, and then the opportunity cost of all the other things I can't be doing. You're in effect setting a priority by making a choice. And so not just as a life philosophy, but as a way to manage your approach to work and the other things you do, that's an interesting way to come at the world. And the way you reconcile hedonism, if I understood you correctly, Natalia, with that Stoic approach is to say, look, that's just a choice as well. If I choose to now have fun, I'm going to do it in this particular manner, or if I choose to enjoy this aspect.
The greatest thing of it all is that we have the power of choice. This is a gift. And I'm just grateful every day that I can make choices. Because I come from a country, it's not a third world country of anything, but I know firsthand what it is not to be so free that you can make choices. Therefore, I consider myself so privileged in that sense. And I really think it's almost a duty to make the most out of it because we're that lucky.
I really liked your description of your hedonistic stoicism, but I don't know if you know anything about our bios. I'm an editor, ghostwriter, and I just started working with a psychiatrist who has a kind of a new fangled way to treat PTSD. I'm also ex-military, so I have a lot of friends who have PTSD and things like that. And he doesn't use these words, but when I think about his methodology, it's very similar because the current way to do it is to dissect the event or events that led up to your PTSD and just go over them and just he called it reopening the wound after you've went through it. And his method is your stoicism, like, this is what happened. What can you do about it? Can you change it or not? And the question would be no, right? And then if you can't, move forward and look for pleasure in life that brings you pleasure. So that memory, but you have all these pleasant memories to almost outweigh that event so that you can move on with your life.
Yeah.
Very similar and different way to look at it, I think.
And I think it's very healthy to get started by acknowledging that something can be truly shit. I don't know, you lost a limb in war. I'm sorry, there's no good to it. I wish you hadn't lost it. But that does not, it can lead to some good afterwards. And in fact, I think that's really like the stoicism taking play, right? To say, this is the current situation and I'm going to make something good out of it. And if you don't know where to start.
It's a very military attitude too. Like when you're stuck in a war or an enemy is attacking, you're like, "Oh, I can't stop the enemy from attacking. So what can we do to fix that?" It's very interesting to apply that to other things.
Mhm.
So you touched on something a moment ago, Natalia, that I'd like to pick up on just for my own sake. When you were describing your approach to backcountry skiing and going, yeah, I think you said do it as if you weren't going to have any more chances to do it, but at the same time, as if you would have a chance to do it forever. Completely embrace the moment or the experience. But you also used a word that I didn't hear you describe yet your thought process on, which is risk management. So what did you mean when you mentioned risk management in that context? Is it because the activity itself is inherently dangerous or has risks? And so maybe you work into that one because it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. Maybe not so easy to explain, but to give you an idea, first of all, it requires multiple decision making steps, and it all starts with planning. Let's take, okay, tomorrow we're going to start our backcountry skiing season. And that's a big day. We're very excited about that. But the first thing is, okay, we decided that we're going to go. So that's already based on some prior knowledge that, that there is snow out there, that you can, that there are routes that you can start doing, that the weather is going to be okay. There are all these things. So there's a lot of monitoring. And when it comes to risk management, the activity of backcountry skiing is always evolving. So because of the nature of snow, it's always changing. So you have to evaluate before you go and you make decisions before you go. But then you're going to be like on the field and you have to keep making these decisions. And it's not just you, but it's always within the context of a group. And this is why I like small groups, because I think everybody should inform himself or herself and be able to make a decision. And I hate being outvoted, but when that happens, you just have to accept it because there is no right. It's very easy to speak like in hindsight, oh, yeah, that was a wrong decision or that was a right decision. Maybe you say it was right because it went well. Maybe if you had gone 5 minutes later, there would have been an avalanche. And then what? You're a poor decision maker. There are all these dynamics that are unique, I would say, to backcountry skiing that don't happen when you just go running. And it keeps you alert. Let's say it shouldn't paralyze you, or at the same time, if you want to minimize it down to zero, then you should stay home. So it's this balance between what is a reasonable risk or what are the probabilities that something goes wrong. Quite often you want to bring it down. And sometimes, and this is a bit maybe the scary part, sometimes I know that the probabilities are above this, let's say, reasonable, and then you still decide to do it. So that then becomes a matter of how many times you cross the line. You might get very unlucky. You cross the line once in your life and boom, you have an accident, maybe. But I really believe that you have to pick your battles and only go above what you think is a reasonable risk, knowing that you are doing so.
Okay, so my instinct that this is interesting is correct, Natalia. At least I hear in you and in this description what I hear in documentaries about mountain climbers and base jumpers and people who do things that are, I think most people would say, inherently risky. They don't think they're taking unreasonable risks. Although I like that you also admitted that there are times when you say, by God, I'm going to take this risk anyway, even though I'm on the edge of where even I would feel comfortable. They're two different things. There's still that element of planning and care and a deep amount of thought. So for you, the risk is not the same as it is from somebody who doesn't do it from the outside, who says, my God, that's crazy. You've got quite a bit of things that you've thought of and planned of, and you've also got experience by the way of knowing. Probably it's the same for you, Randy. You find yourself in situations that most people would have said, wow, that's a crazy amount of risk, but you're drawing on decades of training and experience. So on the one hand, a person who is experienced can reduce those risks. But at the same time, I have to say, I hear this sort of acceptance of a very high amount of risk objectively seen. If you jump off a mountain with a parachute 100 times, or actually, frankly, even if you just jump out of a plane with a parachute, you have a higher risk of something bad happening. Randy's also jumped out of a whole bunch of planes over the course of his career. You remain jump certified, I think, almost your whole career, didn't you, Randy?
And helicopters. Yep.
And am I wrong to say that's inherently risky?
I think we tend to forget, like we're totally biased as well, because we tend to forget how risky it is to just go on the road and drive a car.
Yes, and you're right. We all underestimate the things that we do because we choose to do them. So I ride motorcycles, and you could just as easily say, whoa, that's a crazy risk. Exactly, because you don't have any control over whether some stupid car runs into you. At least on the mountain, I can choose to do it that day or not. When you first said risk
in your car to go skiing, and I could go in my car and go skydiving, and then we get in a car wreck on the way back, but we were fine doing our risky things, right?
Yeah. I use public transport.
Maybe even more dangerous.
Yeah, I try to minimize there. Don't smoke, don't drink, don't own a car, and then just go hardcore skiing.
The other thing you said, which I like, is the proper way to measure whether someone's approach to risk management is sensible is at the time they are assessing risks, not after you know what happened. You don't look at the end of a good day or a bad day and say, you idiot, you should have done it differently. That's not the way to do risk management. Risk management is always done under conditions of uncertainty. When you don't know whether there's going to be an avalanche, whether the weather's going to hold, whether you have the fitness to do whatever it is you're trying to do, it's in advance. So that's a sensible and correct way to think about it.
There is one component, which is randomness. And yeah, it's in the definition, right? But you have to also factor that in, that you cannot control certain aspects. And that goes for career, health, relationships, sports, you name it. And I think it's really there where this whole ultra running comes in to teach us in a very hard way that even if you put in all the work, even if you have a perfect plan, if you're executing it to the dot, something might still happen that ruins your day, let's say, or your plans, and sometimes you can do a lot of troubleshooting. That's great. And other times you just have to go home and hope for a better day and just try again. And and of course it sucks. And sometimes it might be something small, and other times, and this is, I think, why being a professional athlete is, or I don't know, because I'm not, but might be very difficult when you have 2 chances a year of running a road marathon. Like you have 2 performances in you, and then something happens that is completely out of your control. James knows what it is like to run a marathon under a snowfall. Yeah, but you have to deal with this because that's reality.
No, it's a good point. You can be as prepared as you can, and still it comes down to the day and things are out of your control. We touched around the edges of it for a little bit, but let's get into it head on. How and when did you understand that you had a taste for and a talent for endurance type activities? And maybe you describe for us a little bit what you do and how you came to develop both your passion for it and your performance, let's say, because your performance is also impressive. Tell us a little bit your endurance story.
Sure. I think performance is by chance more. It's a good question. There is not one day that you can point at the calendar and say, oh, that day is when I went crazy. Or when I developed a taste for, I don't know, running 24 hours straight. It has happened progressively, which gives it seems like there's logic behind it. Maybe there is. But I think it also starts with the environment. So for me, the fact that I run for many hours in the mountains is not as relevant as that is happening in that environment. And it was back in 2014. So I was already in Switzerland, that out of curiosity, really, I had never run a marathon. I've never run a road marathon, James. Imagine. And I just signed up. I just signed up like 6 months in advance for a race at the end of the summer in the Alps. It was a marathon distance. And really, out of curiosity, I prepared for it. It's super nice to go through that phase. And it was a really bad weather day. It even started snowing at some point. But we traversed from, I think it was from from Lenzerheide to Davos. So this is on the east part of Switzerland. And I was like completely stoked. Yeah. It was amazing. It's hard to say I enjoyed every bit of it, but of course there is going to be a struggle. Of course it's going to be hard. Like I always say, there's a big difference between doing something hard, like having a challenge ahead of you, and like misery. I'm not interested in misery. I'm not, like, I drop off races because I think I've reached the misery threshold. But I had a great time. And so I planned then for a full 2000 racing season. And it's really, I mean, it's a learning process. Like or at least I made a lot of mistakes, um, and learned from them. And gradually I was just increasing the distance. And then at some point you find yourself, running 100 kilometers, which is not flat. So you're still gaining and losing maybe, 6, 7, 8,000 meters up and then the same down. And it's hard to explain. You need an approach there's a huge planning behind, even like logistically speaking, right? But when you get started, when you get going, there's no way that you can look at the cake ahead of you. Like you just have to mentally cut it into pieces. And even like sometimes when I'm running, let's say I'm running like plus 120K, I look at the profile and see like where the big stop, like the aid stations are. And at the beginning, I don't even allow myself to think about any numbers like until a certain point. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to run 35K or I'm going to run whatever. That could be like 5, 6 hours. And I'm not allowed to think about this monster that we're facing today. And then my friends make a lot of fun of me. I'm not a numbers person, but I do use numbers in my advantage. Let's say you get to that 35, like kilometer 35 out of, okay, let's make it easy, out of 100. And then I start thinking, okay, you got here. That wasn't too bad, was it? Oh, no, it was fine. Think about the following, like when you do 15 more, you're going to be like halfway. Can you imagine? Halfway. And you just started 6 hours ago. So you just like, you keep going. I mean, the moment you've passed half, then it's like already like in your head, you're almost like you're counting back. So that's one thing, but I don't want to, I mean, that's just a small strategy. If there's one takeaway is that I truly enjoy it. Like I'm after enjoyment, even if it's something hard. I'm there to have a good day, and I'm there to troubleshoot and to share with the people that are also in the race. Because if I want a long day out, I can just go on my own any day. But it's such a celebration with the other runners that you don't get to experience when you do a short distance. And maybe that's also why I ended up doing these long things. And you get to see a lot of places which otherwise would take you a long time.
No, I think that's a really good explanation. Thanks, Natalia. And when you started, you said right at the beginning, it's not necessarily so much about the running than the environment. And the way you've described the environment is just physically being out there in these great settings, the atmosphere of being with the other people. You're giving us another angle to this hedonistic stoicism of bringing things together about how you can have that combination. I also understand how you might have had, I won't call it a problem, the experience of becoming an endurance runner. It's because every runner starts with what you said. Gradually, you increase the distance, right? Your problem was you just started your first one with a marathon. That was your problem. So if you start with that as your beginning and gradually increase the distance, where you got to go from there. But
I was a runner, huh? So it's not that I wouldn't recommend that somebody wakes up one morning and signs up for a marathon in 6 months if they've never been running before. So don't do that at home.
yeah, let me introduce you to my friend Randy, who did your first marathon, on 6 hours notice?
What?
No, I beat with no training.
But I was in the Army and I'd run a couple 10 milers, not on a course or anything, just in the military. So 10-mile, a marathon's only a little bit more, like almost a little bit more than twice as much as a 10-miler. And I never had I use your math. Like it's just, and I walked over 20 miles with a big backpack.
Wow.
So I could run 10 miles and then I don't have a backpack and then I could walk 10 miles and I'd be almost finished. So it's logical.
Well done.
Of course, we expect there to be a physical training need. And of course, Randy was fit. You're super fit. The logistics prep is quite interesting. I hadn't thought about that. But of course, considering the extent of those races makes some sense. And your mental tricks are really quite fascinating.
I have the same mental math tricks too. In the military, we're always moving long distances. Sometimes it's a mystery, but in the back of my head, I know there's a schedule. Someone out there has a schedule. So we have to be somewhere to do something if this is a test. So therefore I'm like, well, it can't last more than 24 hours. And I 6 hours. So it would only be 18 hours left feasibly, but obviously they're going to have us sleep. So therefore that's 6 hours. So and then by the time I figured out that number, I'm halfway done. And then, so I do the same math too.
I think it's important to also celebrate like small victory. Like when you have, I don't know, let's say you have 10,000 meters to climb. Yeah, it's too much. How can you even imagine 10,000 meters? So you could even say, okay, when I climb, whatever, you can take the height of your home mountain, or maybe you can take the height of Matterhorn or the height of Everest. You know how it feels like when you reach out, you look at your watch and you've climbed 8,000 meters. You're like, okay, like it's Everest from sea level, not too bad. So you can have a little party in that moment inside you.
Yeah, we used to joke. I track my running statistics, including the height meters, and I would get to some number for the year, like 30,000 meters. And Natalia would say, oh yeah, I did that last weekend. Or
You're Spanish. Have you walked the Camino at all? Has that ever been do you have yours?
I have not. And no, it's not something that I've considered. I tend to run away from crowds. This is also why
There's not really a crowd if you do it the right time. I met my wife on the Camino in 2018.
So it was worth it, huh?
Yes, it was definitely worth it. But the good thing about the Camino is it's already broken. The 800 kilometers is already broken up for you. You can only, because if you don't stop when you're supposed to, there's no place to sleep.
So we did this. We did it early in September this year. It had been in my mind for a long time. We did a traverse. In Switzerland, there are different cantons, and sometimes they have different languages. And there's one big canton that speaks Italian, and it's naturally divided by the main Alpine ridge. So it's very obvious you have to get to the other side. And we did a traverse that is basically, you get to the top of the mountain and you stay more or less on the ridge for 100 kilometers. Amazing. And it's very technical. So you do it, you're very slow. You look at, oh, okay, I did 2 kilometers in 1 hour. Great. We're moving fast. And you know what was great? There's the planning. And so we were doing like 2 to 3 stages in one day. And the beauty of that is we always had lunch. So there was always like, we were passing through a hut that should be the sleeping place, but we could have lunch. And then, so the planning is important.
So basically, Randy, Natalia is saying she would do it, but she would just skip the 2 stops on the Camino.
She'd do it like in 3 days straight.
It's too flat. I need some
The first day on the French way is through the Andes. I would not call that flat.
Yeah.
I got a question though. I got a technical question. Blisters and feet. How does that play? Because 440 kilometers is a long way. And I know in the military, we always have these heavy backpacks too. So it puts more pressure on the ground, maybe causes the blisters. But everybody in the military who does combat operations is familiar with the blisters and the marching with the rucksacks and stuff like that. And do you have any tips on that? Because that would help a lot of people out.
It's a killer. I mean, it has stopped many great runners from finishing a long race. I would apply a principle that is true for everything. What works, works. So you are like doing trial and error until you find what works for you in terms of
Your
socks and like how you, it could be like how you tape your feet, or I know some people that put like extreme amounts of cream. What are you doing? And then it works for me. I'm like, okay, do it. In my case, I do have, I mean, socks are very important and I always use the same ones and they don't manufacture them anymore. So I think I have 2 pairs left that I keep sewing, like fixing them. But yeah, if of course you're lucky if you don't get wet. And if, let's say, if you're not lucky, then you just need to apply self-management. Quite often people, it's ridiculous, right? Like you're running for 30 hours and you're not willing to stop for 5 minutes to take care of your feet. That's stupid. Sometimes it's even like you don't want to put on the jacket, like you're being rained on, but you don't stop to put in the jacket because you're going to lose time. Yeah.
But you're right. What works and don't, I guess the other thing I would say is don't try new equipment on your next big run. I ran, I'm not going to brag because you're running 140 kilometers up a freaking cliff, but I did the 12-mile Spartan run and I would, at the time, the rage was those finger toes socks. And I put the finger toe socks on. I never used them ever in my life, but like walked around in them. And I ended the race with like blisters everywhere. And I was like, actually, 3 miles in, I was having blisters like that. I'm running barefoot. Screw that.
And that's one of those cases, like if it still doesn't mean that the approach is the correct one. Like you would say, oh yeah, this is how it should do it. And the next time you go with a backpack that you've never tried, and then you have the worst soreness of your life.
All right. So based on your experiences, I think the takeaway is what works, but you need to experiment before you are at the big event, because otherwise you're risking, it's a bad risk management approach.
Nutrition is one of the big issues to tackle in ultra running, because let's be honest, like your body doesn't want to run for 30 hours straight. It does not want. It does give in and help you. It helps you get to the end, but your tummy is not happy about that. Yeah.
If I recall correctly, you've had at least one and maybe more than one race where gastrointestinal issues really were the main issue for you, where you either couldn't continue or it was super uncomfortable. How did you manage that? And maybe you can also use this as your link into your managing your health and how your approach to managing your health changed. I don't think we've mentioned yet that aspect of your running and your life, but this isn't be a chance for you to get into it if you want to.
Sure. It's been a process of learning to differentiate between a temporary problem or like a temporary issue that you can solve, or you just need to go through, like just push through it and you're going to get to the other side, versus realizing when something is a real problem that should make you go home. And I think every ultra runner develops a sense for that. I used to, at the beginning, put any discomfort into the second bucket. And so that wasn't great. It was fine because I was still deciding what to do. So that's a good thing. But over time, I've learned to push through certain situations. And I think it's been also thanks to hearing how other people deal with these situations. What's the this talk going in their head? But not only that, but also you need to experience once what it is like to be like this phoenix bird, right? It's unbelievable that at 10 a.m., you might be completely done and destroyed. And at midday, you're a different person. So you just have to say, okay, yeah, this problem belongs to category 1. It's temporary. I can do something about it. Maybe I should eat that, or I should stop doing that, or I should just slow down quite often or drink. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to trust that what I'm doing is going to bring me to a good place. And it's one foot after the other at the end of the day. And yes, you get to the other side and it feels amazing. Yeah. Yes, James. I'm sorry. It's to link it to a big life challenge, let's say, thrown at me in that decision tree. Actually, that's not true. You might think in your stoic decision tree that it belongs to the things you can do nothing about. So in April 2019, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is in absolute terms, shit. You can put it in that category of bad. And it's so just as a super small introduction to what it is. It's an autoimmune disease where your body attacks its own insulin producing cells in the pancreas. And to explain it in very few words, there is no life without insulin. Before the discovery of insulin 100 years ago, any person with type 1 diabetes would like literally waste away and die, because insulin, what it does is moving glucose from your bloodstream into your cells. So it's transporting this energy. And without that, you don't have access to energy, and the body goes really in survival mode. And at the same time, you have a high level of toxicity because all this glucose that is being stuck in your bloodstream. But yeah, the diagnosis is, in my case, it came almost as a blessing, if you wish, because I was in such a advanced state of self implosion. Like my body was suffering so much that I literally thought I was, it was a Tuesday. I thought I wouldn't make it to Friday. So when they
Wow.
told me like when there was a name for it and it didn't mean like imminent death, I was relieved. And so from that moment, for every type 1, you become your own pancreas, basically. And that means you have to administer insulin, which is a hormone that keeps you alive, but can equally kill you. So a little bit too much, and it might kill you if you. And okay, it's very hard to manage. Just that you can imagine in your whole body right now, hopefully both of your bodies, there's 1 teaspoon of glucose in your bloodstream. If you have a banana, the banana is the equivalent of 8 to 9 teaspoons of glucose. So that has to be moved from your bloodstream into your muscles, into your brain, into the different areas of your body. And for that, I have to inject insulin. And where is the journey of what works? And you start a very intense education process when you get diagnosed, because you need to calculate every carbohydrate that you're ingesting. You need to make the math to match the insulin. And if it was that easy, it would be great. But there are up to 45 factors that influence your glucose, even like putting food aside. So how you slept, how stressed you are, where in your cycle might be, and exercise, of course. Exercise is like a massive component to this whole puzzle. So there's, this learning process. I'm thankful that I was empowered from day one from my healthcare team. So the message was, And now I know, spoiler alert, now I know it was not the right message, but okay. They told me you can do anything. You don't have to change. Like you don't have to change anything. But by the way, you have this disease and it comes with some very nasty associated complications, and down the road, you'll get there. And it's overwhelming enough that I didn't doubt for a second that's how it is. So I went into student mode, like top of the class type of student. I would go to a restaurant, ask them to tell me how many grams of rice they're going to put in my risotto. Or I was really paying attention, let's put it that way, extremely. And almost a year went by, and I was very frustrated. I think it was out of frustration of trying so hard. And according to, let's say, I don't have to say my standards, but I was not getting results. And the kind of doctors were telling me that I was doing fine. And I came to a point where I thought, if this is fine, what a life, right? But okay, it, and I should accept it. So it's really hard because you're walking between accepting the level of success that you have versus asking yourself the question, is there a different way? Maybe, but why? Like, why would I not trust what these doctors are telling me? So actually, the skepticism did not come from me. A friend who, oh God, okay, a little explanation. The way you monitor your glucose nowadays, and technology has been a great thing. The way you monitor that is through a sensor that is every 5 minutes gives you a measurement. And because being too low is life threatening right here, right now, there's an alarm protocol built in the sensor that when you're sleeping, if you go too low in the middle of the night, you get alerted. And of course you have to do something about it. And if you don't, you might go into a coma, and then somebody has to do something about it for you. But I live on my own. I cannot rely on this second level. Okay. And here comes the beauty of this whole thing, right? Something really bad happened to me and to many other people. I don't ask myself why me, but then a lot of good has come from it. And one of these great things is that for years I had 3 friends willing to be woken up in the middle of the night, and they were woken up in the middle of the night several times, especially until we fine-tuned this alarm protocol, so that when I was going low and I was not reacting, my friends get an alarm and then they call me. And then if there would be no reply at all from my side, they would call 911 and blah, 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 blah. So can you imagine? This is not a parent. This is not a partner. This is a friend who signs up for something like, okay. So it was one of these friends that one day told me, look, you're in all this trouble. Every time you have your morning gipfeli, your morning croissant, whatever, it's the beginning of the craziness. It's like a carousel of glucose going up and then going down. And you really feel your body doesn't like that. And so she was like, what if you cut down in all these carbs that you're eating? And I was like, but what? Okay, I'm not sure about that. Like, what about sports? And they told me that they have to eat these carbs, etc., etc. But okay, so she really planted the seed, and I was frustrated enough that I went into research mode, and then boom, like this whole universe of thousands of people. This is not an anecdote. This is not n equals 1. Literally, we're following protocols to manage type 1 diabetes that were basically eliminating carbohydrates. And to answer the question of many people, yes, I still have to inject insulin. Yes, it still sucks a lot, but I am getting results. And I have type 1 diabetes on paper, but when I look at my glucose control and when my quarterly averages come out, nobody could tell that I have type 1 diabetes because I have those values of a person with an insulin producing pancreas. And it's a lot of work, but so was it before. And now I'm just like, yeah, I just get results and I enjoy steak very much. And I almost have it every night. Yeah.
So that's a lot of information that you have just shared. It's good. This is going to be super interesting to people. You're giving us insights through your personal anecdote of N=1 of how you have approached life, but we accept that you're thoughtful in your approach to things. So this sounds like it's been a period of some pretty intense highs and lows. And it's nice to see that you seem to be at a high again. And I feel like you have your arms around how you can manage having type 1 diabetes and not compromise on some things that are super important to you. You haven't given up in any way endurance running, right?
I was running an ultramarathon 1 month after my diagnosis. But see, that is really the message. Yes, you can do anything with type 1, and I could, but now I can do the exact same and not at the expense of my health. And it's even less work, honestly, because it's about predictability. And I know that if I have 2 scrambled eggs for breakfast, like it did this morning, there is a small chance that something goes wrong. And this is called the law of the small numbers, which is big. It applies to almost anything, but big amounts of insulin, big errors, and then big consequences. And so if you stay small, everything is small and you can fix errors because they will happen.
Just to make sure I understand this, I think I do, but it sounds like you've largely eliminated or drastically reduced carbohydrate from your diet in general, not just at certain times, but at all. And so that means, and I think you've written about this on your blog, that you believe that is a great driver of endurance performance, that you can do it on the basis of your body stat, basically. You also eat during those races, right? And you're drinking and consuming stuff. So for your normal diet, it's protein and fat, ketosis. Describe it a little bit, what it's like.
It's actually quite simple. I don't think in my groceries bag there is any package like processed food any longer. So basically it's eggs, fish, meat, like green vegetables, nuts, seeds, coffee, black coffee, tea, water. Yeah. So that's some strawberries, some raspberries, but it's not that hard if you're at home. It's definitely harder if you're going to Mountain Hut, where there is a dinner fixed menu. But even there, sometimes I do organize myself and I just pack things in the backpack. But other times I've been always positively surprised by how people want to help. And sometimes if you only asked, you might get the help that you need. And even for people who get supplies through a helicopter. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
The food that you just described as being in your grocery bag is the stuff that we hear recommended for people without diabetes as well. Eat natural foods, eat whole foods, don't eat excess sugar, don't eat carbohydrates. The US, in my opinion, has a very strange approach to food. You'd probably die in a week if you came to South Carolina, because I don't think there's any of that stuff here. I can get you a Coke and fried chicken all day long, but that's not true. There is probably somewhere someone sold a vegetable once. But would you say there's any chance you're actually healthier now than prior to your diagnosis?
Oh yeah, I no doubt about that. It's one of those beautiful side effects, I would say, of this journey. I've learned a lot about physiology of the human body, about the kindness of the high percentage of the majority of the people, about how much we can endure. And yeah, of course, I knew that I can work hard towards a goal and all that, but there is one layer of self-compassion that I did of before. And yeah, so that's maybe a bit. Sometimes I think it's the hedonistic side of things that I also bring in. And sometimes it's you can decide to have a day of weakness. Why not? Maybe you'll be stronger tomorrow.
I sense from our discussion that there are many such, I don't want to say dualities, but things that are in balance or opposition with each other in your life and your career, and where you are focused on and paying attention to consciously making choices. And I like the idea of self-compassion as well, saying, hey, look, it doesn't only ever have to go in one direction. Of course, over time, you want to have continuous improvement and see things going the way that you wish. But at the same time, you're a human and you will have up and down days, just like the world will have things that you don't like and they throw them at you. Do you want to talk about whether there's more to say there? And you're welcome to continue. Or do you want to talk about your journey to being an entrepreneur, to having your own company the second time around, your thought process and going again, why you did it, how it's going?
Perhaps just one last thing, because
Yes.
community is very important. And I've gotten enormous amounts of help from strangers that are not any longer strangers, but I still haven't met them in person. And it's very hard to fight the system because this is what it is. Like when you go, most of the times, unfortunately, when you go to your doctor saying that, hey, what I'd like to try this, what you're faced with is complete opposition. And I'm just, again, lucky enough that I could educate myself, that I could have access to people who have done it before, etc., etc. I was very lucky. And my message here is to say, if there's anyone listening that is a type 1 or knows somebody with type 1 diabetes and would like to further discuss or explore or has any questions, I'm very happy to give a hand, because back to the psychiatrist of Randall from before, receiving is amazing, but giving is like double amazing. I'm very happy to give back to whoever could use it.
Sounds like you need to write a book. Sounds like you need an editor or a ghostwriter.
I foresee good things for the two of you. We will
Yeah.
include your links in the show notes, Natalia, including to your blog and to your company website and any other links that you want to make available to people who either want to do their own research or want to get in touch with you. So thanks for that offer. I think it was probably before we started, your nickname was the Perennial Tiger when I knew you, because of where you come from and your indomitable will. And then we shortened that to PT, which had all sorts of additional meanings in personal torture, physical therapy. But I think we have a new addition,
Torture.
which we're going to call Pancreas Tamer. You are your own pancreas.
Cool.
Yeah.
What was the original P? Say it. Say it.
Pyrenean Tiger, the Pyrenees.
The
Yeah.
Pyrenean tiger. Ooh, nice.
Yeah, whole mountains. I try to go back to those whole mountains every summer. And in fact, this tradition started because of my old friend, mentor, who still go there every year, sets up his home mobile, or what is it, home mobile or mobile home?
Mobile home. Mobile.
Mobile home. Thank you. Thank you. And the sparks in his eyes every evening thinking about what he's going to do the day after, even if it's a place he's been to for 100 times. This is amazing to see somebody with such a love for continuing to explore the outside and the inside. That's very inspiring. So I try to make time every year and go visit him and go visit those mountains that really saw me growing many years ago.
That's really great. And just before we leave it, sorry, something occurred to me about what you were saying about being open to sharing advice and that there is now a big community of people who are following your protocol. Why do you suppose that isn't more widespread? Because it would seem to also, and does it work also for treatment of type 2 diabetes, right? And should, if you think about it, it's the same symptom or the same issue of improper insulin
Yeah,
production.
good question. First of all, before I forget, the approach that I'm following follows a set of practices and recommendations developed by an American doctor who is now, I think, 89, lives with type 1 diabetes since he was 12. Engineer by education. He had to become a doctor to even be taken to, not seriously, but to even being listened to by the community. And his name is Dr. Bernstein. And he has what I would call the Bible of his practices put together into a book called Diabetes Solution. And he also has an amazing YouTube channel answering all sorts of questions, because like type 1 diabetes is 24/7. It's okay. It's nice. I'm not thinking about it while I talk to you because I ate my eggs. I didn't have lunch and I'll just have a steak for dinner. So things are more or less stable, but it never goes away. That's Bernstein. And then there's a community around all this, which is called Type 1 Grit, which is a perfect name if you think about it. Mostly organized through a Facebook group. There are families, there are parents, there are people like me that were diagnosed later in life, like young adults. There are many Americans, but also from many other countries. They can help. They've helped me enormously with the most weird questions. And to your point about why isn't it being embraced? In the case of type 2 diabetes, you can reverse it, basically. By doing all this, you will reverse your insulin resistance, period. You will stop your medications. You will stop those who are on insulin, together with some lifestyle changes, but it's in the food. And the food drives what happens also to some hormones of your body that tell you that you're hungry. And of course, there is addiction as well. But if you manage to change what goes in, you should not have type 2 diabetes.
I'm going to tell you some absolutely incredible statistics that I read upon coming to the US. I think we have 30 million people who have type 2 diabetes, and 30% of Americans are pre-diabetic, which means they're at risk of developing it.
Might be
And
higher.
the advice from the American Diabetic Association on diet, I read it recently. You probably know it better than I do, but the advice of the American Diabetic Association is you can eat whatever you want, just adjust your dosage of insulin appropriately. I think if those 100 million people who are either diabetic or pre-diabetic knew what you just said, which is you can actually control it with diet, and it doesn't have to be a significant impact on your life. That is just, to me, tragic. We're talking about an enormous slice of the population. Anyway, I don't want to get caught up in this too much, but it seems like a really important topic.
It's tragic. It's painful. And change has to come from different angles. And some people are changing the system. Others are more working directly with the healthcare professionals, and others, like myself, just want to get the message out, because I'm not saying that everybody has to do this, not at all. What I'm saying is that everybody should be presented with the opportunity and with the advice, because it's not easy to do this on your own. And you're lucky if you can reach out to people, but that's not enough, because we're speaking of drugs. And yes, you should get the support of a healthcare team to deal with it.
So all joking aside, Dr. Bernstein's 89 years old. You are young and vibrant, and your story is a compelling one. I think the hook of you being this super ultra endurance athlete who has managed to find her way through, this would make a great story. And Randy's idea of having a book, it's not so much about you, although you would be the hook, right? You would draw people in to say, wow, that is such an inspiring story. And that would expose people to the message. Oh, hey, by the way, there is another approach that I might not have heard of. Yeah. Not that I expect 100 million Americans to become endurance athletes. That's actually not the point.
No.
Think about their diet, and that might be a way.
And that's exactly the point. Like, I achieved this, I cannot call it perfect control, but extraordinary control, despite what I do in all this crazy running. It doesn't make it easier. It only makes it harder, because it's a matter of variables. So yes, like a piece of cake is like a huge variable that you're bringing in. But now think about what it is like to run any weekend. I am out for 6, 7, 8 hours. That doesn't make it easier. It has benefits, but it doesn't make it easier.
Yeah. No, so there you go. Randy's an excellent editor, I have to say, and has helped a lot of people tell really compelling stories that also have an important angle that would help others. So keep it in mind as you pursue your otherwise extraordinary career. All right. So we've talked for a while and it's been an interesting discussion. Are there other things, Randy, questions that we haven't addressed? And Natalia, for you, stuff that you wanted to say that you haven't had a chance to say yet? Otherwise, we can start to wrap things up. We didn't talk about your business much.
Very
And if you
happy.
want to
Very
talk about your
happy.
business, go ahead.
I came here to speak about my book. I'm not trying to sell.
That we're going to sell next year?
Yeah, about my business, it's more or less what I was mentioning at the beginning. It's a lot of hard work, but it's beautiful to help teams and companies that have big ambitions and they are aware that they need an external angle or innovation or creativity. And the way I explain it, I've read you, James, about how we should pursue and stay on a job because that's when you really can make a change. But yeah, it's wonderful. I love coming from the outside and back to the corporate world when you have this kind of a secret project that you really want to work on. And if you're lucky, you get to spend 10-20% of your time and still you have all these like internal stakeholders to deal with and etc. And it's very rewarding when you move it forward. But the way I am experiencing like helping from the outside is living in that 10% without any of the kind of internal struggle. And now I'm just presenting, of course, the bright side of the whole story because yes, there is hardship, but it's amazing. And I love coming up with strategies, with concepts for campaigns. I love creating content. And the fact that I can do that at any time during the day and still go for a 2 hours run. I think that's also one of the reasons where I decided to make the move to be able to manage life a bit like in a holistic manner, including diabetes. It's nice that you, instead of trying to fight your body, that you try to adapt to the needs of the body. And this having this life arrangement currently really supports this lifestyle.
Is the big difference between working for a company as a marketing expert that they have other obligations and focuses and you're just part of the company and you give your 2 cents, your opinion, and they're like, oh, yeah, maybe. Then there's no impetus to jump on it. But when you're working externally, they sought you out because they realize they have a problem. They want to listen to you. They want to improve on that. And therefore, they're more motivated. Therefore, you're more motivated and excited to help them. Is that kind of like the difference you're talking about?
Yes, I think by coming from the outside, you're already skipping several steps, like this identifying that we're missing something or we could profit from a new approach, etc. Like usually they have made that journey. And I think the second aspect is that it's simply costing them money. And it we just take for granted sometimes that the brilliant minds that we have in-house that we could deploy and that you bring somebody from the outside and it seems, yeah, it has a cost really. And perhaps the third aspect is that you're fully dedicated to the project. So you can put in 100% of the brain, let's say, and you don't have to be like on multiple topics at the same time and dealing with internal agendas. That's a real pity in big corporations where you see people having agendas that are not aligned with the further purpose of the team, of the company. That was quite frustrating to me.
So you made a compelling case for the benefits of going on your own. I love the expression living in the 10%. In a big company, you might have a little bit of your time that you can dedicate to things in the manner that you just described, but on your own, yes, you have other hassles and issues, but in principle, that's what you're shooting for, to be in that zone of, wow, here I'm really adding value. Here I'm really focusing. Here I'm really doing the most important thing. And my defense of the corporation is actually a contrarian view. And I love to take contrarian views for the sake of discussion. It's easy for people to criticize being in big companies today. And I want to give them a sense that it doesn't have to be all bad. You can actually make a difference. But of course, what you guys are both doing is another way. And I'm not going to say it's the mainstream way, but the appeal of what you're doing is clear, I think, to many people, at least the idea that, hey, by the way, I'm going to be able to make a bigger difference and a quicker difference if I do it on my own this way. Maybe you tell us, just for balance, Natalia, what are some of the frustrations and the difficulties? You miss free office supplies, having assistants. What is the hard part about being on your own? Besides the fact that you got to make your own business or...
Correct. I think you really have to grow some thick skin because you're going to be hugely ignored when you're doing your business development. And so it doesn't matter what a good case you have. There are so many things that escape your control, even when you might be very close to closing a deal. And then you might not know that this person is like about to be promoted or about to leave the company, or there is going to be like a supply shortage of materials, and there might be so many things that you cannot control. So I think being prepared to just absorb the heat of being ignored, of losing at the last moment, that's very important, I think. Yeah, but of course, financially speaking, you should be also careful not to forget that it's super nice to get your salary the first of the month or the 25th of the month. That's not going to happen any longer. But I think most of all is to answer, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it to get rich? Okay, it might be a reason. Why not? Are you doing it because you want to bring your kids to school every day? Maybe. And for me, I do it because of this 10% on one hand, which is that was like the reason when I attempted it in 2020. And now it's perhaps only 50% of the reason. Now, the other 50% is that it's just fits into my life, be it how I manage my chronic condition, how I approach sports. Also, the fact that my partner is not based in Switzerland, so I can travel and work from anywhere. It's just closing the circle, basically.
So I wish that I was on a electric scooter while you guys were running together, having probably conversation, whatever conversations you had for those 10, 15, 20 miles you ran together for those 4 years or whatever. That would have been, I was going to say a fly in the wall, but I don't know if I can keep up with you guys.
Those memories are just priceless. And yeah, that's all I can say. What happens during an empty runner's run stays among the group.
It is a good mix of life lessons, philosophy, work, and everything in between. And that's the thing. If it's a training run for Natalia, she's barely walking, but we're working hard. There's a lot of talking. There is a lot of opportunity for talking. I'm sure it's the same way on a 20-mile march, Randy. You must talk
It's
about
not
that.
because most of the time you're pretending that you're being surrounded by enemies. So everyone has to be quiet. So it's even more lonely, and you're real lonely because you're not, most of the time you are alone or you're in a small group and you're pretending that there are bad guys. And that's the other one, bad guys around you. And so it's a very lonely, the only thing you're doing is, hey man, you got enough water? That's about it.
What I would recommend is you let your hair grow and then you start on audiobooks and podcasts. This is what I do. Nobody will ever know that you're listening.
I want you to hear the enemy.
Okay.
All right. What is ahead for Natalia? We know tomorrow you're starting backcountry skiing season. Have fun with that. How do you want to see business in 5 years, health in 5 years, running? I mean, that has, well, you gave some examples of people staying active till quite late. Is this something you're going to be doing when you're years older, 20 years older?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Despite being, let's say, an ambitious person, if I could just in 5 years look back and have the exact same that I have now, I would be like content. I think, yeah, we sometimes look ahead and forget to realize how much we have today. And I'm happy, I'm grateful. I face challenges every day. And most of the times, lucky enough that I pick which challenges. And yeah, so let's keep it up, basically.
What's your ultra? It's not a marathon because you're running so much more. What's your Everest? If it's not Everest,
Mm.
the one that you're looking forward to doing, is there a 500 miler, 500 one? You know,
Yeah.
good and-
See, this is a good example of basically all that we have discussed up until now. There is this one race in Italy. It's a bit longer than 100 miler. It's 170K. And it takes place at the end of September. And I attempted it in 2022. And I see it all comes together. It was going great. And by like half point of in distance, but not in time. So I had been running for 15 hours and I was anticipating another 20. I was having a great day, but the outlook was for 20 hours of rain. And yeah, James, that's exactly that's a phase. And I was like, no, like,
miserable.
no,
It's miserable,
I
right?
mean, it's misery, correct. So I stopped.
That's funny because in the army we can't stop. They're like, we're gonna do this. I mean, it's because it's snowing and raining, and you're just gonna keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know what? You remind me of an article I read, which motivated me to become a Green Beret, because the Green Beret certification process is very physical.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't know if I want to walk that far. It's so far, and there's so much pain involved in it, and blisters. And then I was reading a running magazine. I never ran marathons when I was younger. I didn't run my first marathon until I was like in my late 20s. But I was an okay runner. I never a great runner. And this lady, a woman in Runner magazine, ran a 100-mile ultra marathon in Africa, like crazy heat, and tore her Achilles like within 5 miles. And I'm reading this article that about her, and she won. She finished and won. And I was like, God, how can I not do what I want now? Anything less than that would just be silly now.
Yeah, I think if it
Now you're my new one. If you're in a worse situation. You got diabetes type 1, you're running 100 miles up the Alps, up the Dolomites and stuff. And now you're my new hero.
I think each person has his or her journey and hurdles. There is no need to go into childhood trauma to find that everybody has some difficulties being along the way. And I like to watch like how others tackle them to really search for inspiration, but also like practical approaches to how to handle different situations. But also, I think for yourself, you have to be like also set your own rules of the game and your own limits. And in this ultra running racing, I've seen many inspiring performances, but I've also seen some people going to places that I hope I never find myself in because I'm able to pull out before. But sometimes I also have increased kind of my tolerance for suffering, and I'm happy about that. But I hope not to lose this threshold definition. Yeah.
I think I've done the opposite. I had this suffering for like 32 years in the military. And now I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna rain. Yeah. It
Isn't it nice?
is, but I have to challenge myself to get out of the house every now and then because I'm like, yeah, it's not that cold. It's only 20.
You can talk to James, who run uninterruptedly for how many days, James? You were running every day.
That's another aspect of craziness that people get into, these running streaks. I only did it for 8 months.
Okay.
I was going for 555 days. You're right. Now you're reminding me that would have been a year and a half, 555 for 5. That was actually a really good stretch because for me, running short distances was also improved my fitness quite a bit. So
That was in 555 AD.
prepares. Exactly. That's what you get talking to old guys, Natalia. You're hearing what's coming for you in some decades. We'll put links in the show notes, but make sure to let us know. We'll put in brand labs. We'll put in permanent movement. I guess we don't need to put in your email address. If people want to contact you, they can do so through the blog. Okay.
They can just drop me a message on permanent movement. Yeah, I'm here to help if I can.
It's great.
Well, I think you've already provided an inspirational message. It's been great talking with you, Natalia. Thanks for coming on and good luck with everything that you've got ahead of you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was really fun.
Good. Bye. We're happy. Yep.
Thank you.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.